It's Israel doing genocide on the Palestinians right now. And there's IDF soldiers singing and in video that the IDF has confirmed about how they're going to wipe out the seed of Amalek. That is a verse in the old Hebrew Bible that talks about exterminating Amalek. So they're talking about genocide against Palestinians. Benjamin Netanyahu has also talked about wiping out Amalek. These are open calls for genocide.
Who were the Amalek or Amalekites? A biblical overview. First, let's explore the origins of the Amalekites. There are some debate among the biblical scholars on the exact origin of the Amalekites. There are two views. First is a minority view, and the later one is more common. Let's go over them one by one. The first view holds that Amalekites are one of the pre-Israelite Canaanite tribes that lived in Canaan before the arrival of Abraham and the Israelites. They would quote Genesis 14:7 to support their argument. In Genesis 14, a group of kings were invading the land of Canaan and defeated the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah and plundered the region. This is what the verse says. And they returned and came to En-Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites. The reference to the country of the Amalekites is the first reference to Amalek or Amalekites in the entire Bible. Some scholars take it literally and say that the Amalekites were one of the indigenous Canaanite tribes. I must remind you that this is the minority view on the origin of the Amalekites. Let's go to the second view. The second view on the origin of Amalek has much more acceptance in the mainstream scholarship. They hold that the origin of the Amalekites to a later period. They would point that Amalekites were not mentioned in the table of the nations in Genesis chapter 10. They would take Genesis 14:7 as anachronism, part of late scribal updating of the text. They would point out that Amalek is one of the grandsons of Esau. Esau's descendants were called Edomites. Amalekites were most likely one of the subgroups within the Edomites. Amalek was one of his grandsons through the line of Esau's firstborn, Eliphaz. We see the reference in Genesis chapter 36, verse 12. Esau's son Eliphaz also had a concubine named Timnah, who bore him Amalek. This genealogical connection establishes a familial relationship between the Edomites and the Amalekites, as both are considered descendants of Esau. The Edomites settled in the region of Edom, southeast of Israel, while the Amalekites were often associated with the region of the Negev and the Sinai Peninsula. We see the reference in the Bible in Numbers chapter 13, verse 29. Here the spies who went into the promised land to explore the land, they came back and they were giving their report to Moses, and this is what they said. They gave Moses this account: we went into the land to which you sent us, and it flows with milk and honey. Here is the fruit. And in verse 29, the Amalekites live in the Negev, the Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. So by the time Israelites entered Canaan, Amalekites became a significant desert tribe occupying the Negev and Sinai Peninsula. Since Israelites were wandering for 40 years in the Sinai desert, they were intercepted by Amalekites who were also living in the same region, had conflicts with them during their wilderness journey. Now let's go to the Battle of Refidim in Exodus chapter 17, verses 8 to 16, the first Israel-Amalek conflict. This Battle of Rephidim took place during the Israelites' journey through the wilderness after their liberation from the slavery in Egypt. So while Israelites were at Rephidim, the Amalekites attacked them. Moses instructed Joshua to choose men to go and fight against the Amalekites, while he and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of a hill. So Moses held up his staff, and as long as his hands were raised, the Israelites prevailed. However, when Moses grew tired and lowered his hand, the Amalekites gained the advantage. To assist Moses, Aaron and Hur provided a stone for him to sit on, and they supported his hands, keeping them raised until sunset. With this help, the Israelites ultimately defeated the Amalekites in the battle. Moses built an altar, and he named it Yahweh Nissi, the Lord is our banner, emphasizing the role of God in their victory. The Battle of Rephidim is significant in the biblical narrative as a demonstration of God's provision and assistance to Israel in times of war. It also serves as a precursor to the broader theme of the Israelites' conflict with various nations during their journey to the Promised Land. In the Promised Land, the later Israel-Amalek conflicts. Refidim was not the last place Amalekites attacked Israel. The Amalekites later joined with the Canaanites and attacked the Israelites at Hormah. Numbers chapter 14, verse 45. Then the Amalekites and Canaanites who lived in the hill country came down and attacked them and beat them down all the way to Hormah. Not just that, even after Israel entered and settled in Canaan, Amalekites continued to pose an existential threat to Israel. In the book of Judges, we see that they banded together with Canaanites and people from neighboring regions like Moabites and Ammonites to wage war on the Israelites. Judges chapter 3, verse 13. Getting the Ammonites and Amalekites to join him, Eglon came and attacked Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms, that is Jericho. Another reference from Judges chapter 6, verse 3. For whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern people invaded the country. So here Amalekites were part of the alliance with Midianites. They constantly attacked Israel and impoverished the people of Israel. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 17 to 19. This is one of the key passages on Amalek. As we saw above, Israel crossed paths with Amalek at different times. Amalek's battle with Israel while they were at Refidim became a crucial paradigm through which their future interactions were viewed. Right after the battle, the Lord told Moses to write down the events that happened in Refidim. This is what God said in Exodus chapter 17, verse 14. The Lord said unto Moses, write this for a memorial in a book and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heaven. At the end of the 40 years wandering in the wilderness, while the new generation of Israelites were about to enter the Promised Land, Moses recounted their journey from Egypt to up until that point. Except Joshua and Caleb, every person who left Egypt died by that time. Moses gave this charge to the new generation that was ready to enter the Promised Land. This is what the passage says. Remember what the Amalekites did to you along the way when you came out of Egypt. When you were weary and worn out, they met you on your journey and attacked all who were lagging behind. They had no fear of God. When the Lord your God gives you rest from all the enemies around you in the land he is giving you to possess as an inheritance, you shall blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. So in this passage, Moses was instructing the Israelites to remember the unprovoked attack by the Amalekites on the Israelites during their weary journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. What made these attacks sinister and evil? At least two things can be said in this connection. First, Amalekites attacked all who were lagging behind, the most weary ones. They attacked those most vulnerable, most likely at the rear end of the Israelite line. God saw that action of Amalek attacking the weakest and the most vulnerable as evil. Second, Amalek had forgotten that Israelites were related to Esau. Israelites were the descendants of Jacob, the younger brother of their ancestor Esau. They did not show any brotherly bond or compassion to the weary Israelites stumbling across the desert. They did not receive them with bread and water. Rather, they brought sword and warfare against them. So here we must remember God's promise to Abraham. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who treat you with contempt. And all the people on the earth will be blessed through you. So Amalek attempt to destroy Israel, and they will reap destruction as their reward. And God saw their lack of compassion and violence as worthy of judgment. The divine judgment against the Amalekites was due to their aggression against the vulnerable fugitives and their lack of fear of God and compassion for the weakest. During the reign of King Hezekiah in the late 8th century, a group of Simeonites killed the remaining Amalekites who had been living in the hill country of Seir. We can read about it in 1 Chronicles chapter 4, verse 42 and 43. Let's read verse 42. 500 of these Simeonites, led by Pelatiah, Neriah, Rephaiah, and Uzziel, the sons of Ishi, invaded the hill country of Seir. They killed the remaining Amalekites who had escaped, and they have lived there to this day. One of the tribes of Israel, the tribe of Simeon, destroyed the Amalekites and took over their lands. Haman, the last Amalek descendant who tried to destroy all the Jews. The last mention of the Amalekites is found in the book of Esther. Haman the Agagite, a descendant of Agag. So he is considered by many biblical scholars and Jewish rabbis as a descendant of the Amalekite king Agag, who was captured by King Saul, later killed by Prophet Samuel. Haman schemed to have all the Jews in Persia annihilated by the order of King Xerxes. But God saved the Jews in Persia through the heroic efforts of Queen Esther. Esther chapter 9 verses 5 to 10 tells us that Haman and his sons and the rest of the Israelites' enemies were destroyed by the order of King Xerxes. In summary, the Amalekite hatred of Israel and Jews and their repeated attempts to destroy God's people led to their ultimate doom. Their fate should be a warning to all who would attempt to curse whom God has blessed. We don't hear about Amalekites in the later biblical literatures, like the prophetic writings. They ceased to exist as a distinct people group.